The crayon smelled like summer and forgotten things, and Grant Ellison found himself unable to breathe. Room 408 had seemed ordinary when he had stepped inside 3 minutes ago. A pediatric wardroom with cheerful animal murals, a small figure propped against pillows, the afternoon light cutting stripes through half-closed blinds. He had come because the hospital administrator had personally requested his presence, because the Ellison Foundation funded this wing, because appearing at bedsides was what billionaire philanthropists did when cameras might be watching. But there were no cameras now, just a 6-year-old girl with a blue streak of marker across her forehead, a charm bracelet jingling softly as she reached into her bedside drawer, and grey eyes that made his chest feel suddenly hollow. His grey eyes. The exact shade, the exact shape, the slight downward tilt at the corners that his mother had always called the Ellison tell. "Look," the girl said, and her voice carried the absolute authority of childhood certainty as she held up a crumpled photograph. Creased, worn soft at the edges, clearly handled hundreds of times by small, careful fingers. Grant's hands had begun to tremble. He noticed this distantly, the way one notices weather changing, his pearl-grey cufflinks catching the fluorescent light, the fine tremor moving through fingers that had signed billion-dollar contracts without a single shake. The photograph showed his face, younger, a candid shot from about 7 years ago. He remembered the day it was taken, the sunlight coming through tall windows, the laughter, the feeling of being completely, terrifyingly happy. He remembered who had been holding the camera. "That's my papa." The girl, Lily, the administrator had called her, Lily with pneumonia, Lily whose emergency contact had not answered, pressed the photograph to her chest protectively. Her charm bracelet sang its tiny silver song. "Mama has this picture in her special box, the one she thinks I don't know about, but I know about it." She looked at him with devastating directness. "You're him. You're my papa." Grant Ellison had closed deals that made grown men weep. He had buried his father in a private ceremony and returned to the office that same afternoon, every emotion locked in a vault that no one had ever breached. He had built an empire on the foundation of absolute control. Control over markets, over outcomes, over himself most of all. But this child's eyes, mirrors of his own, made something inside him buckle. "I, too." His voice came out wrong. Fractured, human. "Now, if you are new here, welcome to the family. And if you are returning, I am so glad you came back." Before we discover exactly what shattered this billionaire's carefully constructed world, before we learn about the woman who kept that photograph hidden and the lie that stole 7 years of his life, drop a comment telling me where you are listening from today. And if you have not already, that subscribe button takes just a second, but it means you will never miss the next chapter of stories like this one. Because what Grant Ellison does not know yet, standing frozen in that hospital room with his certainties crumbling around him, is that this moment, this impossible world-ending moment, is only the beginning. The girl was still watching him, still waiting, still holding that photograph like a treasure, like proof, like an answer to a question she had been asking her whole short life. And somewhere in this city, a woman he had once loved was about to discover that the walls she had built to protect her daughter were about to come crashing down. The town car moved through morning traffic with the kind of smooth precision that money could buy, and Grant Ellison sat in the back seat feeling absolutely nothing at all. He rolled the pearl-grey cufflink between his thumb and forefinger, a habit he had developed years ago, though he could not remember exactly when. These particular cufflinks were the ones he wore when he felt nothing and needed to look like he felt something. They had belonged to his grandfather. They cost more than most people's cars. They were, like everything else in his life, perfectly appropriate and completely meaningless. Deirdre sat across from him, tablet in hand, running through the morning's schedule with the efficiency of someone who had spent 7 years learning to read his silences. Hospital ribbon cutting at 9, board call at 11, lunch with the Japanese investors at 1. She paused mid-sentence, her eyes flickering to his jaw. "You're tense," she said. "Not a question. I'm fine. You've been rolling that cufflink for 12 minutes straight." Grant's hand stilled. He had not noticed. The hospital visit. How long? 45 minutes. The Ellison Foundation funded 60% of the new pediatric wing. They want photos, a short speech. I've prepared remarks. Shorten it. It's already short. Make it shorter. Deirdre made a note on her tablet, but her eyes stayed on him a moment longer than necessary. 7 years, and she had learned to read his moods the way sailors read weather, not by what he showed, but by what he did not. Today, something was different, a tightness in his jaw she had not seen in months, a stillness that felt less like calm and more like something held underwater. Grant Ellison ran his empire the way a surgeon ran an operating room. No wasted motion, no wasted words. Every decision calculated, every outcome anticipated, every variable controlled. He had built Ellison Capital from the ruins of his father's failed ambitions into something that made the financial papers use words like unprecedented and visionary. He was 37 years old. He was worth more than some small countries. And he had built walls so high around himself that he had forgotten somewhere along the way that there was anything on the other side. The ribbon cutting took exactly 9 minutes. Grant stood on the small stage they had constructed in the hospital lobby, said Deirdre's words with the practiced ease of a man who had learned long ago that sincerity could be performed, and smiled for the cameras with precisely the right amount of warmth. Not too much. That would seem desperate. Not too little. That would seem cold. The perfect calibrated smile of a billionaire philanthropist doing what billionaire philanthropists did. He signed the oversized ceremonial check with his precise handwriting, shook hands with the hospital board, and was calculating his exit when Dr. Fan appeared at his elbow. Mr. Ellison, would you consider touring the ward itself? Grant's smile did not waver. I'm afraid my schedule. The children would love it. Some of them have been here for weeks. A visitor makes their whole day, especially someone like you. Someone like you? Grant wondered what that meant exactly. Someone rich, someone famous, someone whose foundation name was plastered across the building's new wing in letters large enough to read from the parking lot. 10 minutes, Deirdre said quietly, and Grant recognized the diplomatic tone that meant this would be good for optics, good for the foundation's image, good for all the metrics that mattered to people who tracked such things. 10 minutes, Grant agreed. The tour became a study in emotional distance. Dr. Fan walked him through the pediatric wing with obvious pride, pointing out the state-of-the-art equipment, the family waiting rooms, the play areas designed by child psychologists. Grant nodded appropriately. He shook hands with nurses. He let a toddler in a tiny hospital gown grab his finger and squeeze with surprising strength. He said things like wonderful and impressive and important work, while his mind remained somewhere else entirely, gone behind his own eyes, watching himself perform humanity without feeling any of it. This was what his life had become. Show up, write checks, leave before anything touched him. Room by room, the ward unfolded before him. Children with balloons tied to bed rails, the helium shapes bobbing gently in the climate-controlled air. Stuffed animals arranged in elaborate formations on blankets. A boy with a leg brace playing video games at full volume, barely glancing up as the billionaire passed his door. A girl singing softly to herself, her IV lines swaying with the rhythm of her small movements. Grant calculated exit strategies, noted the distance to the elevator, shook hands with parents who looked at him with that particular expression he had grown to recognize. Gratitude mixed with something else, something that might have been hope, as if his presence could somehow heal what was broken in their children. And underneath it all, cutting through the antiseptic smell that clung to every surface, something else, something warm and waxy that made his chest hurt for reasons he could not name. Crayons, the smell of crayons. He did not understand why that scent made him want to stop walking, why it caught somewhere in his ribs and pulled. He filed it away as irrelevant and followed Dr. Fan around the final corner. Last room, the doctor said. Room 408, Lily. She's been with us for 3 days. Pneumonia complicated by a hairline fracture in her left leg from a fall just before admission. She's recovering well on both fronts, but her emergency contact hasn't been reachable. She's been a little lonely, I think, though she won't admit it. Tough kid. Grant stepped through the doorway, already preparing his exit line, already calculating the seconds, until he could leave this place with its smells and its hope and its small bodies fighting battles no child should have to fight. Then he saw the walls. The room was covered in drawings, not the mass-produced prints that hung in other rooms. These were hand-drawn, taped to every available surface with surgical tape. Some hung crooked, overlapping each other in cheerful chaos. Bright colors everywhere. Suns with rays extending to paper edges. Houses with smoking chimneys. Trees made of circles stacked on brown rectangles. And in every single drawing, 3 figures. A woman with curly hair drawn in wild loops of brown crayon. A small girl in various colored dresses. And a tall man. The tall man appeared in every single picture, standing next to the house, holding hands with the other figures, sometimes floating in the corner like an afterthought, but always present. Grant's gaze moved from the walls to the bed. A small girl propped against pillows, pink cast on her left leg, covered in marker drawings, more suns, more stick figures. A crayon clutched in her right hand, working on yet another picture. Curly hair falling across her face in tangles that had not seen a brush in days. She pushed the hair back with her crayon hand, leaving a streak of blue across her forehead. Her charm bracelet jingled with the motion. Then she looked up. What do you think this child is about to say? Drop your guess in the comments. I promise you will not see this coming, because what happened next in room 408 would shatter everything Grant Ellison believed about his life, his past, and the woman he had tried for 7 years to forget. Grant Ellison had closed $100 million deals without blinking. He had walked into boardrooms filled with hostile men who wanted to see him fail and walked out with their signatures on his terms. He had delivered his father's eulogy in front of 300 people without a single crack in his voice, had stood at the graveside while dirt fell on mahogany, and felt nothing but the cold efficiency of another task completed. He had built his entire existence on the foundation of control, emotional, financial, physical, until control became not just a strategy, but the architecture of his soul. But when this girl looked up at him with those grey eyes, the same shade that stared back at him from mirrors every morning, something inside him buckled, not cracked, not bent, buckled, like steel under impossible weight, like a bridge giving way in slow motion. Lily studied him with the unself-conscious intensity of childhood. Her head tilted slightly to the left. Her charm bracelet caught the light as she reached beneath her pillow, small fingers searching for something hidden there. Grant watched her pull out a photograph. Crumpled, worn at the edges, creased down the middle where it had been folded and unfolded countless times. The colors had faded from years of handling, from being pressed between small palms, from being kissed goodnight by a child who had never met the face it captured. She held it up next to his face, compared back and forth. The photo, then him. The photo, then him. Her eyes tracking the similarities with the careful attention of someone completing a very important puzzle. Then she smiled. One front tooth missing. Charm bracelet jangling as she lowered the photograph to her lap. Papa, not a question, a statement. As certain as sunrise, as matter-of-fact as announcing that the sky was blue or that crayons smelled like summer. Grant did not move, did not breathe. His hands had begun to tremble. He could see them shaking at the edges of his vision, his cufflinks catching the light as his fingers rolled them automatically, the nervous habit he had never managed to break despite years of trying. Dr. Fan's nervous laughter cut through the silence. Oh, Lily, sweetie. This is Mr. Ellison. He's not. That's my papa. Lily's voice carried the patient tone of a child explaining something obvious to a confused adult. Mama has this picture in her special box, the one under her bed. I'm not supposed to open it, but I did because I wanted to see what Papa looked like. She paused, considering. I wasn't being bad. I just wanted to know. No guilt in her voice, no apology. Children did not apologize for wanting to know where they came from. It was the most fundamental question of existence, and she had simply gone looking for the answer. Grant's voice came out barely audible. Where did you get that? I told you. Mama's special box. She keeps it locked, but I found where she hides the key, in her sock drawer behind the fuzzy ones. Lily held up the photograph again, showing it to him like proof. You look older now, but it's still you. Grant felt his knees bend. He did not make the conscious decision to kneel. His body simply folded, bringing him to eye level with this impossible child. Her face softer than his, rounder, warmer. The genetics filtered through someone else, someone who had given this girl her curly hair and her missing tooth and the spray of freckles across her nose. But the eyes were a mirror. The eyes were unmistakably, undeniably his. What's your mama's name? Lily opened her mouth to answer. Lily, I brought you pudding from the... The voice came from the doorway. It stopped mid-sentence, the words dying as if someone had cut the power to a recording. Grant turned. She stood frozen in the doorway, and 7 years collapsed into a single look. Pale blue scrubs hung from shoulders that were thinner than he remembered. White sneakers with a scuff on the left toe. Curly hair pulled back in a low bun, strands escaping at the temples in that way he had once found impossibly charming. No makeup except lip balm, her face bare in a way that made the exhaustion beneath her eyes impossible to hide. A hospital ID badge clipped to her scrubs read, V. Cole, Nursing Administration, Vivian. She looked exactly like the woman in that photograph, and nothing like her at all. The girl who had taken that photo had been laughing, her head thrown back, joy radiating from every line of her body. This woman standing in the doorway, 30 years old now, worn beyond her age. This woman had not laughed like that in a very long time. Something had hollowed her out. Something had taught her to stand with her weight balanced, ready to move, ready to run or fight, whichever became necessary. The pudding cup hit the floor. Butterscotch splashed across white linoleum in a small, silent explosion. Neither of them noticed. Neither of them could look away from the other. Grant stood slowly, his mouth opened and closed. All the words he had ever known seemed to have abandoned him, fled somewhere unreachable, leaving only the shape of her name on his tongue. Vivian, he said it, like a prayer he had forgotten he had been repeating, like something sacred and terrible. Like the name of a wound that had never healed. Pain flickered across her face. Old pain. The kind that had grown into bone. The kind that lived in the body so long it became part of the architecture. He watched her blink, watched the flicker, vanish behind walls that went up so fast he could almost hear them slamming into place. Her jaw set, her shoulders squared. The transformation took less than 2 seconds. Vulnerable woman to fortress. She crossed the room in 4 quick steps, placed herself between Grant and the bed, between Grant and Lily, her body a barrier, her presence a declaration. He's not your papa, baby. But Mama, his face is the same as the picture. Lily, gentle but final, the voice of a woman who had learned to be both mother and protector, who had spent years building walls to keep the outside world from touching this child. I need you to rest now. Close your eyes. But... Close your eyes, sweetheart. Vivian turned to Grant. Brown eyes met grey. Up close, he could see the exhaustion carved into her features, the fine lines around her mouth, between her brows, the careful distance she was constructing in real time, brick by brick, word by word. It's Miss Cole, and you need to leave. Behind him, Deirdre appeared in the doorway. Mr. Ellison? The car is waiting. Leave. Vivian's voice dropped, quieter now, almost a plea, though she would never admit to pleading. Please, just leave. Grant looked past her to Lily. The girl had not closed her eyes. She held up the photograph one more time, her small face confused, the certainty of childhood colliding with an adult reality she could not understand. But why? She whispered. Nobody answered. Grant's legs carried him down the corridor, past the nurse's station with its ringing phones and shuffling paperwork, past the murals of cartoon animals and sunny skies, past the boy with the video game and the girl who had been singing to herself. The crayon smell followed him. The image of Butterscotch splashed across white linoleum. The grey eyes that had said, Papa, with absolute faith. He made it to the stairwell before his body gave out. Cold concrete pressed against his back as he slid down the wall. He put his hands over his face and stayed there, breathing, not moving, while his carefully constructed world rearranged itself into something he no longer recognized. 6 years old. The girl was 6 years old. He had last seen Vivian 7 years ago. The mathematics were simple, the implications were devastating. Cancel my afternoon. His voice sounded strange to his own ears when Deirdre found him 20 minutes later. Flat, distant. The voice of a man operating on autopilot, while his actual self existed somewhere else entirely. All of it? All of it. Deirdre did not ask why. She had seen his face. In 7 years of working by his side, she had never seen that expression. The look of a man who had just discovered that the life he had been living was built on a floor that was not there, and now he was falling. Grant waited. Event staff cleared out. Corridors quieted. Shifts changed. The day workers replaced by evening nurses with softer voices and gentler footsteps. He sat in the hospital cafeteria and drank coffee that tasted like nothing. He watched the clock. He watched the elevators. He waited until the chaos settled into routine, and then he walked back to the 4th floor. Vivian stood in the hallway outside room 408, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes closed. A paper coffee cup sat on the windowsill beside her, still full, gone cold hours ago. She was not resting. He understood that immediately. She was standing guard, waiting for him to come back because she knew he would, because she knew him, or she had known him once, before everything went wrong. Her eyes opened at his footsteps. No surprise in her expression, just exhaustion, and beneath that, something harder. Something that had been sharpened by years of doing whatever was necessary. I said to leave. Is she mine? Family. This moment right here is where everything changes. If you are feeling this story, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. And tell me in the comments, do you think Grant knew about his daughter, or is something more complicated going on here? Because the answer to that question is going to break your heart. Is she mine? The question hung in the corridor between them, heavy with 7 years of silence. Vivian's arms remained crossed, her body still positioned like a shield between him and room 408. You already know the answer to that. Say it. Why? Her voice carried an edge that could cut glass. So you can do what your mother did? Write a check? Make us disappear again? Grant's hands went still. The cufflinks stopped mid-roll. Something in his chest seized, a cold hand wrapping around his heart and squeezing. What did you just say? You heard me. My mother. What about my mother? Vivian studied him with those brown eyes that had once looked at him with such warmth, such trust. Now they held nothing but exhaustion and years of carefully maintained distance. Don't pretend you don't know. Don't stand there in your $3,000 suit and pretend you weren't part of it. Part of what? Vivian, I have no idea what you're talking about. She laughed then, but there was no humor in it. The sound scraped against the quiet corridor like sandpaper. Your mother came to my apartment. I was 23 years old, 12 weeks pregnant. She sat on my second-hand couch. You remember that couch, the one with the stain on the armrest that we used to joke about, and she told me you knew about the baby, that you wanted me gone. Grant felt the blood drain from his face. That's not. She handed me a check. She had lawyer's letters with official letterhead. She told me that if I tried to contact you, if I tried to claim any connection to the Ellison name, she would take the baby. She said she had the resources to make my life impossible, and I believed her. I had no one, Grant. My parents were gone. I was working double shifts to pay for nursing school. I had nothing and no one, and she knew exactly how alone I was. Vivian's voice cracked slightly. But she pressed on, and then she said the words that broke me. She said, he's choosing his legacy over you. Accept it with dignity. The corridor seemed to tilt. Grant reached out, his hand finding the wall, steadying himself against the impossible weight of what he was hearing. I wrote you, Vivian continued. 17 letters, during the pregnancy after Lily was born. Your mother told me you read them all. She said you called them pathetic. She said you laughed at them. I never received a single letter from you. The words came out hoarse, barely audible above the distant hum of the vending machine at the end of the hall. Vivian's expression flickered. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not belief, not yet, but the first crack in a wall she had spent 7 years building. 17 letters, she repeated slowly. I wrote about everything. The pregnancy, my fears, how much I wanted you to come back. I wrote about Lily's first steps, her first words. Her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. Her first word was Papa, because I used to talk about you. I used to tell her stories about her father before I understood, before I realized you were never coming. Grant pushed himself off the wall. His legs felt unsteady, his body operating on pure adrenaline. When I came home that night, the night you disappeared, there was nothing. No note, no forwarding address. Nothing. I called your phone for 3 days straight until the number was disconnected. I went to every place you might have gone. I filed a missing persons report. Vivian, the police told me you'd left voluntarily, that there was no crime in a woman walking away. I didn't. My mother told me you took money and left. She said you'd been offered a settlement and you'd accepted it gladly, that you didn't want the life I was offering, you wanted cash instead, that you'd always been after the money, and once you got it, you vanished. They stared at each other across 3 feet of hospital corridor. The vending machine hummed its tuneless song. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped its steady rhythm. The world continued around them, while the foundations of their separate realities crumbled into dust. For 7 years, she had carried a story of abandonment by a man who did not want her. He had carried a story of abandonment by a woman who did not want him. Neither version was true. That night, Grant stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse and watched the city sprawl beneath him like a circuit board of lights and possibilities. 2,800 square feet of Italian marble and custom furniture. Art that had been selected by a decorator whose name he could not remember. A kitchen with appliances still in their original packaging, because he never cooked, never ate here, never did anything in this space except sleep and stare at these same windows. Not a single thing that mattered. Except one thing. He reached into his wallet. His fingers found the familiar edge, the soft, worn texture that came from years of handling. He pulled out the photograph carefully. The way you handle something precious and irreplaceable. Vivian at 23, laughing in sunlight. Head thrown back, curly hair wild in the wind, joy radiating from every line of her body. He had taken that photograph himself, then printed it. A physical copy, because some things needed to exist in a form you could hold. 7 years in his wallet, through board meetings where billions changed hands, through acquisition dinners with rivals who would have paid dearly to know his weaknesses, through sleepless nights in identical hotel rooms across a dozen time zones, never shown to anyone, never mentioned, the only honest thing in his life. He made the phone call at 11 at night. His lawyer answered on the 3rd ring, voice groggy with sleep. My mother, a private safe deposit box. Anything opened or accessed in the last 7 years, I need records, I need access. Grant, it's 11 at night. Now. He hung up, pressed the photograph against his chest. For the first time in memory, the silence of his penthouse was unbearable. 2 days later, he stood in a small private room at a bank he had never visited. Beige walls, single overhead light, brass box the size of a shoebox sitting on the table before him. The records had been clear. The box existed, registered to the Ellison family office. Opened 7 years ago, shortly after Vivian disappeared. Accessed 17 times over the following years. 17 times. The bank manager left him alone with the box. Grant stood there for a long moment, his hands flat on the cool metal surface, preparing himself for what he might find inside. The smell hit him first, when he lifted the lid. Old paper, dried ink, and beneath those, the ghost of a perfume he had never forgotten. Lavender and something warmer. Honey, the scent Vivian used to wear, transferred from her hands to the paper, preserved in this airless space for years. Inside, 17 envelopes, cream-colored, handwritten addresses in Vivian's careful script. His name on every one, Grant Ellison. His address at the time, the apartment he had lived in before the penthouse, before the empire grew too large for normal spaces. Every single envelope sealed, unopened. His mother had never read them. She had not cared enough about the words to even satisfy her curiosity. She had simply intercepted them and locked them away like invoices she had no intention of paying, like problems she had solved and filed. Grant's hands trembled as he opened the first letter. "I don't know if your mother told you, but I want you to hear it from me. I'm pregnant, 11 weeks. The doctor says everything looks healthy. I'm scared, Grant. I'm so scared, but I'm also happy. Please, call me. Come find me. I'm still here. I'm still here." He opened the fourth. "It's been 4 months. The baby is healthy. It's a girl. I want to name her Lily. I keep waiting for you to call. I check my phone 100 times a day. I dream about you showing up at my door. I know your mother said you don't want this, but I keep hoping she's wrong. Mothers can be wrong, can't they?" He opened the 15th. "Lily walked today. 3 steps and then she fell and laughed. She has your eyes, Grant. She has your stubborn mouth that sets when she's determined. You would love her, but you'll never know her. I've stopped waiting." He opened the 17th, the last. "I understand now. You were never going to choose us. Your mother was right. Legacy matters more than love. I need to stop writing these letters to a man who doesn't read them, who never wanted to read them. Goodbye, Grant. We don't need anyone. That's what I tell Lily now. That's what I'll keep telling her until she believes it. Until I believe it." Grant sat in that beige room with its single overhead light and put his head in his hands. He wept silently. The way a man weeps when he discovers the emptiness he has lived in was not fate or failure, but theft. When he understands that every hollow morning, every meaningless success, every night of staring at city lights and wondering why nothing felt like enough, all of it had been engineered by someone who claimed to love him. 17 letters, 17 chances stolen. Drop a comment. If you have ever had someone keep something from you that changed everything. The drive to his mother's estate took 45 minutes. 12 acres of Georgian brick and white columns. Ivy trimmed to precise lines by gardeners who came 3 times a week. The air smelled of lilies, always lilies. His mother's favorite flower, planted throughout the grounds in careful arrangements that bloomed from spring through fall. Margot Ellison stood in the drawing room when he entered. She never sat when she could stand. It was a power position, a way of maintaining control over any conversation. Charcoal suit tailored perfectly to her slim frame. Silver hair arranged in an elegant sweep. Pearl earrings catching the afternoon light that streamed through tall windows. 70 years old, and still capable of controlling every room she entered through presence alone. Grant did not speak. He walked to the table, antique, Louis XIV, worth more than most houses, and placed the letters down one by one, the soft sound of paper on polished wood. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 17. Margot watched. Her expression did not change. Those belong in the past. They belong to me. They belong to a situation I handled, a problem I solved. You should be grateful. Grant felt something cold settle in his chest. You told her I knew. You told her I called her letters pathetic. You told me she took money and ran. Every word was a lie. Margot reached up and adjusted her pearl earrings. Left one first, then right. He recognized the gesture. Her tell. The thing she did when she was calculating, preparing her next move. That girl would have ruined everything I built for you. She was a nursing student with no family, no name, no resources. You were about to launch the Meridian Towers project. The investors were watching every move you made. A scandal, an illegitimate child with some nobody, would have destroyed everything before it started. I made a decision. The right decision. The decision you weren't capable of making yourself. You stole my child from me. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. The silence that followed seemed to press against the walls. Margot blinked. Once, I protected your future. I have a daughter. Grant's voice remained steady, but something dangerous moved beneath the surface. A 6-year-old daughter who is lying in a hospital bed calling me Papa, and she's right. She is absolutely right. I am her father. And you kept that from me. For 6 years you kept that from me. You'll thank me one day. Margot's tone carried the absolute certainty of someone who had never doubted herself. Love fades, Grant. Passion fades. That girl would have grown tired of your hours, your ambitions, your world. She would have taken half of everything in the divorce and raised that child to resent you. I saved you from that. Legacy doesn't fade. Buildings don't leave. The Ellison name will outlast all of us, and that is what matters. Grant stared at his mother. He stared at the woman he had tried his entire life to please, whose approval he had chased through every deal, every acquisition, every success. He saw her clearly now. Perhaps for the first time. You didn't protect me. You robbed me. You robbed me of 6 years with my daughter. You robbed me of the woman I loved. You robbed Vivian of believing anyone could choose her, and you did it all while telling yourself you were helping. He gathered the letters with careful precision, placed them back in their stack. We're done. He walked out, did not look back. Margot stood alone in the drawing room. After a long moment, she crossed to her writing desk and pulled out a leather-bound notebook, open to an entry dated 7 years ago. Her own handwriting, precise and controlled. V. Cole. Matter resolved. Check issued. Letters rerouted. Grant informed. Accepted explanation without challenge. Family protected. She stared at those words for a very long time. The hospital break room on the 3rd floor smelled of reheated soup and someone's forgotten birthday cake. Vivian sat alone at a corner table, an untouched sandwich and cold coffee before her. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. She looked up when Grant entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. He sat without asking, placed the stack of letters between them on the scratched formica surface. Her hand went to her mouth. Where did you? Oh, my mother's safe deposit box. Everyone sealed. She never opened them. I never read a single word until 2 days ago. Vivian touched the top envelope, turned it over with trembling fingers, saw the seal, unbroken, intact, exactly as she had left it 7 years ago, when she had dropped it in the mail with shaking hands and desperate hope. All 17? All 17. She pulled her hand back, as if the paper had burned her. She sat on my couch. She had lawyers, official letterhead. She said if I made contact, she'd take the baby. I was 23, Grant. I was 12 weeks pregnant and terrified, and I had no... 1. My parents had been gone for 3 years. I was working double shifts and studying for exams, and I had nothing, and she knew that. She knew exactly how alone I was, and she used it. Why did you take the check? Vivian's laugh was hollow. Not for the money. I never cashed it. It's still in that box under my bed, the one Lily found. I took it because I was scared, because I believed her, because I thought. She stopped, swallowed. I thought you had really chosen your name over us, over me, over our baby. Grant reached across the table. His fingers hovered over hers without touching. I would have chosen you. His voice cracked on the words. I would have chosen you over every building I've ever put my name on. Every deal, every dollar. I would have chosen you, Vivian. And I would have chosen her, our daughter. I would have chosen both of you without hesitation. I mourned you. Vivian's eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. I buried you in my heart so I could survive. I told myself every single day, we don't need anyone. I made that our truth because the alternative was falling apart. The alternative was admitting that I had loved someone who threw me away, and I couldn't survive that, so I made you into a villain. It was easier. The photograph, in Lily's hand. Why did you keep it? Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Because I couldn't make myself throw it away. Because some mornings I would look at it and remember what it felt like to be that happy. Because Lily deserved to know what her father looked like, even if she never met him. Grant looked down at his hands. He was rolling the cufflink again without realizing. I never stopped looking for what was missing, he said quietly. I built buildings, filled skylines, woke every morning in a penthouse that felt like a hotel room. No warmth, no sound. No one humming in the kitchen the way you used to when you made coffee. He looked up at her, and something raw and unguarded showed in his expression. It was you. What was missing was always you. Family, we are at the turning point. These two people spent 7 years believing lies about each other. Can they find their way back? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You do not want to miss how this unfolds. And tell me, have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything you believed? That afternoon found Grant in the chair beside Lily's bed, his jacket draped over the armrest and his sleeves rolled up to his elbows in a way that would have horrified his tailor. Vivian was at the nurse's station down the hall, close enough to hear if Lily called out, but far enough to give them space. Grant understood what that distance cost her. The trust it required to leave her daughter alone, with a man who was still, in many ways, a stranger. Lily worked on a new drawing with the focused intensity of an artist in the midst of creation. Her tongue poked out slightly from the corner of her mouth as she selected colors from the pile of crayons scattered across her hospital blanket. The blue streak on her forehead had faded to a pale smudge, but her fingers were freshly stained with green and yellow. "This is Mama." She pointed to a figure with curly lines radiating wildly from its round head. "See the hair? Mama has the curliest hair in the whole world. Sometimes birds want to live in it." She giggled at her own joke, then moved her crayon to the next figure. "And this is me. I gave myself purple shoes because purple is the best color. And this." She pointed to the tall figure on the other side of the paper. "This is Papa. Lily. You are my Papa." She said it with the devastating simplicity of a child who could not understand why adults insisted on complicating simple things. "I know because your eyes are the same as mine. Mama's eyes are brown, my eyes are grey, and your eyes are grey. So..." She shrugged, as if the matter were settled beyond all possible dispute. "That's just how it works." Grant watched her add careful details to the drawing. Buttons on his figure's shirt, a tiny charm bracelet on hers. She worked with complete absorption, humming softly to herself. "But why didn't you come before?" The question hit like a fist to the chest. Grant's hand stilled on the armrest. He looked at this small person, who had his eyes and his stubborn jaw, and absolutely none of the walls he had spent his life constructing. "I didn't know where to find you." The truth, but not enough. No explanation could fill 6 years of absence. No words could account for first steps he had not witnessed, first words he had not heard, birthday candles he had not helped blow out. The mathematics of loss were simple and brutal. 2,190 days, 52,560 hours, every single one of them stolen. Lily considered his answer with the seriousness it deserved. Then she added a yellow sun to the corner of her drawing, rays extending to the very edge of the paper. "Mama says we don't need anyone." Her voice was matter-of-fact, reciting a familiar truth. "She says it every day. We're a team, just us two. We don't need anyone." She paused, her crayon hovering over the paper. "But I think she's wrong, because everyone needs a papa, even if they pretend they don't." Grant reached out before he could stop himself. He did not take her whole hand. That felt too presumptuous, too much like claiming something he had not earned. Instead, he took just her fingers, small, warm, paint-stained fingers that curled around his with instinctive trust, something he did not deserve, but would spend the rest of his life earning. 3 days later, Margot came to the hospital. She arrived immaculate and armored, her silver hair perfectly arranged, her charcoal suit pressed to razor-sharp creases. Pearl earrings caught the fluorescent light. Her heels clicked against the linoleum with the precise rhythm of someone who expected the world to arrange itself around her footsteps. She found Vivian in the corridor, outside room 408. The two women faced each other across 7 years and a wall of lies, one in designer silk, the other in pale blue scrubs with a coffee stain on the sleeve. "Vivian." Margot's voice was pleasant, modulated, the tone she used for acquaintances at fundraisers. "You look well." "You're not welcome here. I won't take much of your time." Margot reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope. Cream-colored, the same color as the letters she had locked away for 7 years. "I think you'll find this more than generous. Enough for Lily's education, the best schools, private tutors, anything she needs. Enough to relocate comfortably, somewhere far from here. Somewhere you can build a life without the complications that come with the Ellison name." Vivian looked at the envelope. Her expression did not change. "Take the check." Margot's voice dropped, becoming almost confidential, almost kind. Give him up. You know this world will eat you alive. The scrutiny, the expectations, the people who will judge every choice you make, every outfit you wear, every word that comes out of your mouth. You're not built for it, Vivian. You never were. Take the money. Spare yourself the humiliation. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the envelope, then at the woman holding it. 7 years ago, she had been too young and too frightened to see Margot clearly. She had seen only the power, the certainty, the expensive lawyers, and the threats that felt so impossibly large. Now she saw a woman who was afraid. Vivian stepped forward, close enough that Margot took an involuntary half-step back. The first time she had ceded ground in years, perhaps decades. The last time you handed me a check, I was 23 and terrified. I had no one, no parents to call, no money to fight you with, no idea how to stand up to someone like you. I believed every word you said because I had no reason to think anyone would lie about something so enormous. She paused. Let the silence stretch. I'm not 23 anymore. Margot's hand went to her pearls. Her fingers were not quite steady. I am a nurse administrator at this hospital. I have raised a daughter alone for 6 years. A daughter who is brave and brilliant and kind despite everything this world has thrown at her. And she is all of those things because of me. Not because of your money, not because of your name, not because of anything you built or protected or controlled, because I showed up every single day, through every fever and every nightmare and every time she asked about her father, and I had to find a way to answer. I showed up. Vivian took the envelope from Margot's hand, held it for a moment, feeling the weight of the paper, the familiar cream color that had haunted her memories for years. Very deliberately, she tore it in half. The pieces fluttered to the floor, landing on the white linoleum like fallen leaves. Leave. And don't come near Lily. Ever. Margot stared at the torn envelope on the floor. For half a second, something moved behind her eyes. Not remorse, not yet, perhaps not ever, but the shadow of recognition. The dawning understanding that control and power were not the same thing. That you could arrange the world exactly as you wanted it and still find yourself standing alone in a hospital corridor, watching your carefully constructed empire crumble around your feet. Her heels clicked against the linoleum as she walked away, and for the first time, the rhythm sounded like retreat. 1 week later, the cast came off. The doctor worked carefully, the small saw humming as it cut through pink plaster. Lily watched with fascination, her grey eyes tracking every movement. Vivian held her hand, fingers intertwined, the grip of a mother who had spent 6 years being the only anchor her daughter needed. Grant stood by the window, watching them both. It feels weird. Lily flexed her freed leg experimentally, wiggling her toes. Like my leg forgot how to be a leg. Like it's been sleeping for a really long time and now it's waking up all tingly. The doctor smiled, gave instructions about physical therapy and gradual movement, and left them alone in the room that had somehow become the center of Grant's universe over the past 2 weeks. He had spent his adult life in rooms full of people, feeling nothing. Boardrooms packed with executives hanging on his every word. Galas crowded with the wealthy and powerful seeking his attention. Penthouse parties where everyone wanted something from him and no one wanted him. He had moved through those spaces like a ghost, present but not there, going through motions that had long ago stopped meaning anything. Now he stood in a small hospital room with a woman who had not forgiven him yet, and a child he had known for 2 weeks, and he felt everything. Every emotion he had locked away came flooding back. Hope and fear and longing, and something that felt terrifyingly like joy. Lily slid off the bed. She walked carefully, testing the leg that had been imprisoned in plaster, her charm bracelet jingling with each tentative step. She crossed to Grant first, took his fingers the way she had that first afternoon. Not his whole hand, just his fingers, curling her small paint-stained ones around his. Then she crossed to Vivian, took her fingers in exactly the same way. She stood between them, a 6-year-old bridge holding 2 broken adults together by nothing more than her grip and her absolute certainty that this was how things were supposed to be. "Can Papa come home with us?" The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that holds its breath, that waits for something important to happen. Vivian looked at Lily, then at Grant. He looked back. 7 years of silence lived in that look. Letters never read. Nights spent alone in apartments that felt too empty, in penthouses that felt too large. A little girl drawing pictures of a family she had never had, placing that tall figure in every scene because children understand what adults forget. That wanting something does not make you weak. It makes you human. Vivian's lips parted. She tucked a curl behind her ear, the same gesture she had made 7 years ago, in a sunlit apartment, in a different life. Grant, not Mr. Ellison. Grant. One word carrying every unsent letter, every unspoken apology. Every night in that small apartment with cinnamon in the air and her daughter sleeping in the next room. Every time she had wondered what would have happened if the world had been kinder. Every morning she had woken up and chosen to keep going anyway. Grant heard it, all of it. Everything she could not say yet lived in those 5 letters, in the way her voice softened around his name, in the almost smile that touched the corners of her mouth. He looked at Lily. "Yeah," Lily said, confirming what was obviously already decided. "Papa's coming home." That single word, Grant, carries 7 years of healing in it. If you felt that moment, share this story with someone who needs it today. There were no public scenes, no lawsuits filed, no dramatic confrontations staged for maximum damage. That was not how Grant operated. Power wielded quietly was power that lasted. He stood in his mother's drawing room one final time, surrounded by fresh lilies and antique furniture, and the suffocating perfection of a life built on control. Margot faced him across the Persian rug, her posture straight, her expression carefully neutral. "I'm removing your access to the family trust. Effective immediately." "You can't." "I already have. My lawyers filed this morning. The board has been notified. The transition is already in process." Margot adjusted her pearl earrings, the nervous tell she had never managed to eliminate. "I built that trust. Every dollar in it came from decisions I made, connections I cultivated." "You can keep the name." Grant stood, buttoned his jacket with precise movements, looked at his mother, really looked, and for the first time in his life, he did not see a powerful woman. He saw a frightened one, a woman so terrified of losing control that she had destroyed the only thing worth having, a woman who had won every battle she had ever fought and somehow ended up standing alone in an immaculate house, surrounded by flowers that would wilt within a week. "You've lost the family." He walked out, did not look back. Margot stood in the drawing room after he left. The lilies perfumed the air. The afternoon light fell through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted like lost thoughts. The house was silent, not peaceful, but empty. The silence of a museum after closing, the silence of rooms that no one would visit. She walked to her writing desk, opened the leather-bound notebook she had kept for decades, filled with careful entries documenting decisions made and problems solved. Her finger found the page dated 7 years ago, traced across the words written in her own precise hand. "Family protected." The crack widened, not into remorse. She had never been capable of that particular weakness, but into recognition, the slow, terrible understanding that you could win every battle and still lose the war. That you could protect a legacy so fiercely that you became the only one left to inherit it. She sat down on the settee. First time in years. Grant carried the box himself. It was wooden, about the size of a loaf of bread, with a small brass clasp that had gone slightly green with age. Vivian had finally shown it to him the night before, sitting on the floor of her small apartment with Lily asleep in the next room. She had pulled it from under her bed, the same spot where Lily had found the photograph that had started everything, and placed it between them without a word. He had opened it carefully, as if it might contain something fragile. And it did. It contained the most fragile thing in the world, the evidence of a love that had survived its own destruction. Inside, he found dried lavender from a bouquet he had given her during their first year together. The flowers had faded to grey-purple, their scent almost gone, but not quite, not entirely. A hospital bracelet from Lily's birth, so small it could wrap around 2 of his fingers, with tiny printed letters spelling out Baby Girl Cole, and a date that marked the beginning of everything he had missed. 3 birthday candles, 1 pink, 1 yellow, 1 blue, from cakes Vivian had baked alone in her kitchen, singing happy birthday to a daughter who blew out the flames and wished for things her mother could not give her. The photograph of Grant, laughing in sunlight, worn soft from years of handling, and beneath everything else, a stack of papers covered in Vivian's handwriting. Not the letters she had mailed. Those were still in Grant's possession, read and reread until he had memorized every word. These were the drafts, the versions too raw, too honest, too broken to send. The letters where she had written things like, "I hate you for leaving," and "I love you and I can't stop," and "Why wasn't I enough?" The letters where her handwriting dissolved into illegibility because she had been crying too hard to see the page. Not a keepsake box, a reliquary, the sacred remains of a love she could not let go of and could not live inside anymore. She had kept it under her bed for 6 years, adding to it slowly. A birthday candle here, a pressed flower there, building a shrine to something that was supposed to be dead but refused to stop breathing. Grant had closed the box carefully, looked at Vivian across the small space between them, said nothing, because there was nothing to say that could match what that box contained. Now he carried it out of the hospital on a Tuesday afternoon, the weight of it solid and real against his chest. Vivian walked beside him. Lily walked between them, holding their fingers. Not their hands, their fingers, that specific, delicate grip that said, "I am holding on, but gently, because I know people can let go." The automatic doors whooshed open, and they stepped into afternoon sunlight. The air smelled like summer coming, cut grass and warm concrete, and something sweet from the bakery across the street. Lily squinted up at the sky, her charm bracelet catching the light. "Can we get a dog?" she asked. "We'll talk about it," Vivian said. "That means maybe. Maybe usually means yes, if I ask enough times." Lily skipped slightly, testing her healed leg. "Do you think my leg will set off metal detectors? I want to set off metal detectors. That would be so cool." "There's no metal in your leg, sweetheart." "Are you sure?" "Because I feel like there might be a tiny bit of robot." She tugged on Grant's fingers. "What should we have for dinner?" "I want pizza, or tacos, or pizza tacos. Is that a thing? Can we make that a thing?" Grant listened to her chatter, watched her skip and bounce and fill the air with the particular energy of a 6-year-old who had been cooped up in a hospital room for too long. He watched Vivian answer each question with patience, tuck her hair behind her ear when the wind blew it across her face. When his free hand brushed against hers, accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, maybe nothing between them would ever be accidental again, she did not pull away. He reached for his cufflinks, the old habit, the nervous tell. Then he stopped. He looked at his hands, the box tucked under his arm, the woman beside him, the child between them, still chattering about pizza tacos and robot legs, and whether dogs could be taught to play video games. He let his hand fall. He did not need the habit anymore. That night, on the refrigerator in Vivian's small warm kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and something baking, held in place by a ladybug magnet with one slightly crooked antenna, hung Lily's newest drawing. A tall man with grey circle eyes. A woman with curly hair exploding from her head in wild brown loops. A small girl in the middle, holding their fingers. A yellow sun in the corner with rays extending to the very edge of the paper. A house behind them with a red door and smoke curling from the chimney, even though it was almost summer, even though Vivian's apartment did not have a chimney. And underneath the tall man, written in shaky 6-year-old handwriting with letters that tilted slightly to the left, one word. Papa. Family. That is where we will leave them. For now, together in a small kitchen that smells like home, with a drawing on the refrigerator and a box full of sacred things and a future that finally feels possible. But there are questions still unanswered, threads still hanging. Margot sits alone in her immaculate house, surrounded by flowers that will wilt and silence that will grow. If you want to know what happens next, if you want to see whether stolen time can truly be reclaimed, subscribe and hit that bell so you do not miss a single chapter. And tell me in the comments, What do you think Margot will do now that she has lost everything? I will see you in the next one. Remember to always stay golden.